The rain was relentless, pounding against the windshield like thousands of tiny hammers. Julia gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity, her heart racing faster than the car's wipers could clear the glass. Her phone buzzed for the 5th time in as many minutes, and she didn't have to glance down to know it was Tom, her husband. She ignored it, just like she had the others. Her mind raced, filled with memories and emotions that churned with the same intensity as the storm outside. Guilt gnawed at her. She had just come from an afternoon spent in a hotel room with Greg, her lover of 2 years. Greg was charming, confident, everything Tom used to be, everything he wasn't anymore. But now, the guilt was overwhelming. Tom wasn't perfect, but he didn't deserve this. The weight of her secret was beginning to crush her, and as she drove back home through the heavy rain, the realization settled in her chest: she needed to end the affair. For good. The guilt, the lies, the sneaking around, it had to stop. She had to tell Greg it was over. As she turned onto the narrow, winding road that cut through the outskirts of town, her phone buzzed again. This time, without thinking, she glanced down at the screen. That was when everything changed. Her eyes flickered up just in time to see the headlights of an oncoming truck. It was too late. She yanked the wheel to the right, but the road was slick with rain, and the tires skidded. There was a deafening crash as metal met metal. Her world spun, the car flipping, tumbling off the road and into the ditch. And then, silence. When Julia opened her eyes, she wasn't in her car anymore. There was no rain, no broken glass, no twisted wreckage. Instead, she stood in the middle of an endless expanse of mirrored walls, their surfaces so pristine and perfect that they reflected her in every direction. She blinked, disoriented. The air was heavy, thick, almost suffocating, and the temperature was neither warm nor cold, just an unsettling, unnatural stillness. "Where am I?" Julia muttered, her voice echoing back at her from the mirrors. Her reflection stared back at her, but something was off. The Julia in the mirror didn't look panicked or confused. She was calm, serene, almost mocking in her stillness. Julia took a step forward, her reflection mimicking the movement perfectly. Panic began to rise in her chest. She looked around, but all she could see was an endless maze of mirrors, stretching out in every direction. There was no escape, no door, no sign of where she was or how she had gotten there. "Hello," she called out, her voice shaky. "Is anyone there?" Her reflection answered her question with a cruel, twisted smile. Julia stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest. No, this can't be real. She turned around, desperate to find a way out, but every step she took only led her deeper into the mirrored labyrinth. The reflections around her grew more distorted, more grotesque. They twisted and warped, their faces stretching into monstrous shapes, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Her heart raced as she began to run, her footsteps echoing loudly in the mirrored maze. But no matter how fast she ran or how far she went, the mirrors were always there, reflecting her fear back at her. Finally, exhausted and gasping for breath, Julia collapsed onto the ground. Her reflection loomed above her, the twisted, distorted version of herself grinning wickedly down at her. "This can't be happening," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm dead, aren't I? I died in that crash." "Yes," a voice said from behind her, sending a chill down her spine. Julia scrambled to her feet and spun around. Standing in the center of the mirrored room was a figure she hadn't seen before. It was a woman, but not quite, a shadowy figure with eyes that seemed to burn with an eerie light. She was dressed in a simple black gown, her hands folded in front of her, her expression unreadable. "Who are you?" Julia asked, her voice trembling. The woman tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. "You can call me a guide," she said, her voice smooth and cold. "Or a judge. It doesn't really matter. What matters is where you are." "And where is that?" Julia asked, fear tightening her chest. The woman gestured to the mirrors around them. "This is your purgatory." Purgatory. The word hit Julia like a punch to the gut. But why? Why am I here? The woman smiled, though there was no warmth in it. You know why, Julia. Adultery, deceit, selfishness. Your choices have led you here. But more than that, she stepped closer, her eyes boring into Julia's. You never truly felt remorse for what you did. Not until it was too late. Julia's legs gave out, and she sank to her knees, sobbing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you, the woman asked, her tone almost mocking. Or are you just sorry you got caught in the end? Julia looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. Please, please, just let me out of here. I'll do anything. The woman regarded her with cold, calculating eyes. There is no escape from this place, Julia. You are trapped here for as long as it takes. As long as it takes for what? Julia whispered, her voice hoarse with desperation. As long as it takes for you to truly understand, the woman said, her expression unreadable. With that, the woman turned and began to walk away, her form dissolving into the mirrored walls. Julia reached out after her, but it was too late. She was alone again, surrounded by her own distorted reflections. Time didn't exist in this place. Minutes, hours, days, it all blurred together into an endless cycle of torment. The mirrors never left her, never stopped showing her the twisted, monstrous versions of herself. She saw herself as the liar, the cheat, the selfish woman who had destroyed her own marriage. But worse than the reflections were the memories. Every moment of her affair with Greg played out before her eyes, over and over again. She saw the lies she told Tom, the excuses, the sneaking around. She saw the look in Tom's eyes when he tried to reach out to her, tried to reconnect, and how she had pushed him away. The guilt gnawed at her, relentless and unforgiving. She had never truly understood the damage she had done, not until now. She had taken everything for granted, her marriage, her life, and now she was paying the price. But no matter how much she cried, no matter how much she begged for forgiveness, the mirrors never changed. They continued to show her the same distorted, horrifying images of herself, a constant reminder of her sins. And then, one day, or perhaps it wasn't a day, for time had no meaning here, something changed. Julia stood before one of the mirrors, staring at her reflection. But this time, her reflection wasn't twisted or grotesque. It was just her. The real her. For the first time, she didn't look away. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'm sorry for everything. Her reflection smiled, a sad, gentle smile. And then, slowly, the glass began to crack. Tiny fractures spread across the surface of the mirror, splintering and shattering until the glass crumbled away, revealing a dark, empty void beyond. Julia took a step back, her heart racing. The void seemed to beckon her, a vast emptiness that promised an end to her suffering. But she hesitated. Could she really face the consequences of her actions? Could she truly accept responsibility for everything she had done? She took a deep breath, closing her eyes. And then, with trembling hands, she stepped forward into the void. The next time Julia opened her eyes, she was lying on the side of the road. Her car was still there, crumpled and twisted from the crash. The rain had stopped, and the sky above was clear, the stars twinkling faintly in the distance. She was no longer trapped in the mirrors, no longer surrounded by her own distorted reflection. But as she looked around, she realized something even more horrifying. She was still dead. The world around her was different now. It was quiet, empty, devoid of life. She was alone, forever walking the road between life and death, forever haunted by the choices she had made. And no matter how far she walked, no matter how much she pleaded for forgiveness, the void stretched out before her, endless and unforgiving. This was her purgatory. And she was never getting out. I struggled, trying to push him away, but he was stronger than I expected. Panic surged through me, my mind racing. How had it come to this? How had I let things get so out of control? I didn't want this, I gasped, my voice shaking. Marcus's grip tightened, his eyes boring into mine. Liar. The blade pressed against my skin, and I braced myself for the worst. But then, something changed. Marcus hesitated, his grip loosening just slightly. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. I seized the opportunity, shoving him with all my strength. He stumbled back, the knife slipping from his hand. I didn't think, I just ran, my heart pounding in my chest as I bolted for the front door. Behind me, I heard Marcus's footsteps, heavy and fast. He was right on my heels, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I burst through the front door, the cold night air hitting me like a slap in the face. My car was parked in the driveway, the keys still in my pocket. I fumbled with them, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock the door. Marcus was almost on me. I could hear his footsteps, feel his presence closing in. Finally, the door unlocked. I threw myself inside, slamming the door shut just as Marcus reached the car. His face twisted in rage, his fists pounding against the window. I started the engine, my hands trembling as I threw the car into reverse. The tires screeched as I backed out of the driveway, my heart racing. As I sped down the dark, empty street, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Marcus stood in the middle of the road, watching me, his face illuminated by the car's taillights. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The game was over.